we go. Got it. Okay. Good afternoon, Julie.
Good afternoon, Carla.
Welcome to everybody who's beaming in to listen to this chit chat this afternoon, where I am joined by Julie Nugent, who is an experienced RTLB. And Julie, you are beaming in from Auckland this afternoon.
Yes, it does sound a bit Star Trekky when you say it like that, doesn't it? Yes, I'm beaming in.
Well, you did tell me when you came on about, putting your headset on and you were channeling.
That's right, directing.
So,
that's right.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, keep it going. It's really, really lovely to have you joining me for this chit chat this afternoon, where we sort of turn our focus to what you've done in your role as an RTLB to influence and enable evidence-based shifts in literacy education. So what I'd like to do, Julie, is just start by telling everybody a little bit about you and just sharing a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do in your line of work. So Julie is obviously an RTLB based in the Auckland region, who has a passion for learning and leadership. Julie is a true advocate for meaningful, sustainable, and person-centered work, from effective literacy practices to community engagement. So this afternoon, we're going to explore some of Julie's insights in what it takes to make a difference in education. And I'm really excited. I just want to add this piece in here as I'm partway through. It's really, really exciting to be talking to you, particularly in your role as an RTLB, because RTLBs and RT-LITs have such a strong positive influence, Julie, as do learning support coordinators in this space of educational, creating educational shifts. So I'm really excited to hear about this and what we're going to talk about this afternoon. So on the back of many years of experience of teaching and learning support roles, Julie is now an RTLB based in Cluster 8 in Auckland, Tamaki Makaurau. She is as much a learner as she is a leader and practices from a stance of passion, community, and flexibility. So welcome to this chit chat. We're going to hear about how you are elbow deep in leading through and supporting the shift to move towards a structured literacy approach in those schools that you work with in your role as RTLB. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you for inviting me to be on. It's really a privilege. I watch these from the shadows normally, and so it's a little bit different to be actually standing at the front of the stage. So let's hope
And I think, Julie, I'd like to share about how this kind of came about with you having a chit chat with me. Was we've known each other for quite some time, and we were having a chat one afternoon quite some time ago, but having a chat about some of the work that you're doing. And it really dawned on me that as well as me reaching further afield to source research and to source some tips and tools from different people internationally, we've got a lot of really great stuff happening here on our local land, and we need to sort of tap into that. So we've got a few other people joining us to share a local lens a little bit later on in the year as well. So Julie, how about we begin our chit chat this afternoon with you sharing with us some of the steps that you've taken in your role as an RTLB to influence the implementation of structured literacy across your cluster.
Absolutely. And just before I start, can I also say it is amazing what practitioners are doing around the country. So even though I'm giving you my snapshot, I am in awe of what's happening with other people. So I'm not saying this is the right way. This is how we're doing it.
Great.
Okay, so steps that we are taking. Probably all of the steps that we've taken have come out of conversations, really. It has not been a deliberate, this is what the aim is going to be for the next 2 years. It's been more around needs have arisen, people have asked questions, there's been people seeking support, and all of the steps have sort of evolved quite naturally out of that. So it's been a really organic process, and that's been exciting to be part of. because there's a flow that goes with that. That means that it's just as energy giving as it is energy sapping, you know. So probably the first steps that we took were in response to people asking for support around that tier 3 kind of level. They wanted support with their older struggling readers. They wanted support with dyslexia. How do we identify students with dyslexia? We're waiting for information from the ministry and it's not coming. Where do we find it? What are these tools we're supposed to use? And that was a really nice doorway in, because of course that leads automatically to a structured approach to literacy in response to those needs. So we kind of started there. So looking at that tier 3 kind of work in individual schools. And one of the first things that we did in one situation was we got the ideal license for a group of students that were being supported through teacher aid support. And that went really well. They could see the difference. They wanted to put more students in. And there was support that we gave to the school around that, because it's no point in just having the teacher aides as the keepers of the knowledge. The general classroom teacher needed that. Pretty soon after that, we had people asking for support around identifying learning difficulties. And so I did a workshop, an online workshop around using the simple view of reading to identify reading difficulties. And that was really interesting and great. And that became a platform for further exploration as well. And through interactions with individual schools and conversations here or there, the need became more apparent, because teachers haven't known where to go to get support. They don't know that there's not a clear pathway for them. Well, how do I know what this means? What might this look like in my school? Where do I get the PD? Where do I get the resources? How do I start? What do I do next? So it became apparent that there was a need for some general understanding and professional development around what a structured approach to literacy is. So that began a series of workshops, some with learning support coordinators and DPs and their literacy team, some across year 1 and 2, some across the whole school, some school across a number of schools, and even inside our own cluster with RTLB, some professional development sessions around what it really means. And alongside that, the development of a community of practice within the RTLB cluster, which was a good place to start. But one of the biggest probably risks I took as a practitioner was beginning the Big 6 series of workshops. So that became, in my own exploration about what it meant to do to have a structured approach to literacy and what was the science of reading saying, I found the 5 pillars of reading. And then added in, as Australia does, the oral language, whereas I see you've got orthographic mapping. So I do think it's something that evolves. It's really just a foundation. So that became a series of 6 workshops, which are now housed inside that effective literacy playbook. And now that those are recorded, they've been delivered, they've been recorded, and they're sitting there, that becomes an easy resource that you can share and tap in and out of. So the steps up until the beginning of this year were really trying to respond to questions as they arose and trying to give people a basic knowledge. This year, it's got really exciting, because as people have started to go down that pathway and develop a little bit more self-efficacy around what they're doing, you know, they've got some things to lean on and now they know what their next steps are, we pulled together a group of practitioners to create a collab, really, that doesn't have leadership. It's supported, I support it, but we meet twice a term. We're called Capable, which stands for a collab of Auckland practitioners advancing better literacy for everyone.
Wow.
And which was much better than the Structured Literacy Auckland group, because that went. I'm going to my SLAG meeting, didn't have the same ring with the principal. So we have a capable group, and the practitioners that I work with in those meetings are so inspirational, and it's so exciting to be around. They are exploring how different assessments gather different bits of information, and how they can do those assessments to track across the school. They're looking at how to purchase their decodables, how to organise their reading room against their uniquely developed scope and sequence. They're looking at which is the best bang for buck for professional development, and all of them have a license to Ideal, because Ideal as a 101 of what does a structured approach to literacy mean? What is this? What do I need to understand as a practitioner? What tools and resources do I need to support my kids? It's such a perfect tool. It's like it pulls together resources in a way that support.
I haven't paid you to say this.
No, you haven't. But I do it. All of those. That's how we kind of got together. So it's not their only resource. Schools are really eclectic. But as a way of supporting the practitioners as well as students, that ideal learning license, not necessarily whole school in these situations, in this circumstance, but as a way of supporting understanding and growth, and then checking on how that's working and looking at next steps. It's a perfect foundation.
Great.
So we've been doing that. And then that's kind of the steps that we've taken. It's sort of started small, got bigger, and now it's much more collaborative.
So Julie, as you were talking, I jotted down a few things, and I was thinking you started about how this really started as an organic process, and what I'm going to talk to now and kind of review takes us into my second question for us to chat about with you. But you've actually talked a lot throughout the course of answering that first question about the organic process, and you've given lots of examples that show how you as an RTLB cluster teacher, person, leader is actually listening and noticing and responding based on whatever it is that has been shared. And so I can only but imagine that throughout the course of these actions that you've taken, there has been a lot of trust established and kind of shared respect between the people that are in your capable group and the people that you're working with in schools. So this is not about positioning oneself as being the font of all. It's actually more, by the sounds of it, being a process of growing capability right across a community.
Absolutely.
And so you've done that through really consciously and carefully building knowledge. And all the while you've been building that knowledge, you've been thinking about, what's the most effective way to do this? And it sounds like that's evolved over time into you creating these 6 individual learning modules that are now recorded for the people across the community to kind of hinge back to. Have you seen a flow-on effect? Like you've started potentially from a place of intervention, or those maybe were the first people that came to you where students weren't experiencing success, but has there been intervention and, emphasis spread back into classrooms as a result of this as well?
Absolutely. So what we're finding, or what I'm observing, is that it's generally in the year 1 and 2 classrooms that the growth really starts to take hold. And that is now starting to sort of marinate its way through the rest of schools in most contexts. So we've kind of got this, we're in this awkward stage, aren't we, of change in the country, because we've still got our students that needed support at tier 3 because they didn't get that foundational level support when they needed it. And then we're trying to build something new. So it's very much everybody's building the plane as they're flying it. But they definitely, as the data comes in and people see the growth, that becomes exciting. It takes on a move, an energy of its own, and it bleeds through into the classrooms either side, and the conversations spark other conversations, and that sparks further growth, and that sparks people encouraging each other and sharing of resources. The generosity of people, I've noticed, sharing resources is amazing. And that's not just in the cluster. You can Olwen Johnson is perfectly happy to jump into a workshop with us and talk to us about dibbles, or Emma Nana can do that. I've done research questions, I've presented research questions to Chrissy Braid and a few other people, and people want to share. People are excited to share.
Brilliant. And I think that all comes back to, I think the reality there is that for those of us who are in the space of working in a role where we want to influence, enable, and empower this shift, we believe in this so wholeheartedly. We see the results. There is no turning back. In fact, if there was having to be a turning back, I'd probably have to leave the country or quit my job or do something like that. A lot of teachers say that now, you know, if they had to teach how they used to teach, or, you know, all of this was taken away from them, they would walk away from it. And I think that speaks volumes for how important this collective emphasis on this shift is as well. So Julie, if you think about as you've been instigating this change leadership process, I'm going to call it, what would you say that you've really needed to be consciously aware of as you have supported and guided people to make the biggest shift in their practice in their lifetime of teaching?
Well, that's just what you said there is the most important thing that I've found to be aware of. This is the biggest shift. We've got now, you know, the common practice model saying that we're moving away. Those language learning progressions are gone. We're now moving towards a scope and a sequence of activities with a common practice model of how we should be doing that. And it's a wave that's coming through, and everybody is in different places on that wave. And some have set themselves up, they're on their board, they've already got a few things under their belt, and as it comes through, they're hoping to just sort of catch it and paddle on in and feel well prepared and secure. Whereas others, it's really, you know, they're running the risk at this point of getting hit in the back of the head with the wave and ending up face down in the sand. And that's scary. We all have to help each other with this. The reading wars that we know should be over are not.
No.
There's a really large number of practitioners that are really entrenched in their practice, and it's not their fault. They're teaching reading the best way they know how. They didn't learn anything any differently. And research tells us that actually there is inconsistency across those teacher training programs. You know, in New Zealand, we know that it's been a whole language approach, and we've gone, you know, top down instead of bottom up. And we've generally been, you know, guided by products that don't necessarily have a research base. So we've got the PM readers and the benchmarks and the colour wheel and those sorts of things. And it's taking a while. It's a scary process for people to leave that behind and move to this bottom-up code-based approach.
Yeah.
And if people don't believe that it's going to support their students, if they don't believe that it's going to make a difference and that they need to make that leap or little steps towards that change, they won't take it on. They'll find a million reasons not to do it. So I have to be careful as a practitioner myself that when I'm presenting information, I'm doing it in a way that still respects and acknowledges that people have invested wholeheartedly in their approach and done the best that they could, and may need just a little bit more support to move across. And I'm hoping that those people that have made the leap and seen huge growth and change in their practice will be enough to start to make those others take a bit of a look again.
Can I just say, Julie, that you're very PC, and I appreciate that. So we can play a little bit of good cop, bad cop now.
Okay, good.
You've just played the good cop role, and I'm going to play the bad cop role.
Right.
And say that just to, you know, share a little bit more around what you're talking about and what I've experienced and kind of where I've come to with these observations across the country, particularly with what's occurred in the last 6 months, with the work of the common practice model, with the potential re-signing of the reading recovery contract, and the release of, you know, kind of information from reading recovery about trying to align to Scarborough's reading rope and saying all the right buzzwords in their communication. I think what's really interesting, there's 2 big things that sit really heavily for me. Number one is this: the war predominantly sits amongst tier 3 intervention teachers. That's where the reading wars predominantly sits. And what's ironic about the fact that it sits there is that those of us who operate in that space are working with the most vulnerable children who have the most to lose should we not get this right. We know that what's been implemented for 40 or 50 years historically hasn't met the needs of those children because they cycle back into intervention time and time again.
Absolutely.
So it would be great for us to continue in the vein that you're talking about being nurturing in our leadership, about being supportive, because at the end of the day, what makes the difference is all of us as educators being vulnerable enough to say, what I might do might not be the right way to do it, or I may not know everything. None of us know everything about this, but yeah, so just had to add that little piece in because it's something that's actually sat really heavy with me for a week coming into this chit chat, observing what's going on with some of these different intervention programs, particularly across the country.
Well, alongside this, I'm doing some, an inquiry, a practitioner inquiry into the enabling factors that help teachers make the support, to make that shift to a structured approach to literacy, so that my next steps can be a little bit more effective, I hope. But what I'm learning is that their teacher beliefs and teacher self-efficacy is a significant thing.
Yes.
Teachers need to believe that it's going to make a difference.
Yes.
Teachers need the knowledge that they haven't been given. There's a theory called the Peter effect. So we know about the Matthew effect, but the Peter effect is you can't teach what you don't know. Totally. So teachers need the knowledge, the explicit knowledge and the linguistic understanding of the English language and how that works. And, they can't be expected to teach something they don't know. So we need some good PD. We need a lot of support. We need to do a lot of coaching and mentoring, in-class modeling, a lot of collaboration, because collaboration is a really safe way to explore and wonder and ask questions about things if you're doing it with peers that you feel safe with.
Yeah.
And
I
gently start shifting practice.
I think we grow a lot from collaboration too. And I think the more we collaborate, the more we're able to lean into important and somewhat difficult conversations and the hard kind of crunchy bits of the learning, because it's like we've got that support blanket of our colleagues around us. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And in those conversations, you can explore things that you can't really get your head around if someone's just delivering PD. So you can say things like, well, I don't have time to run 2 whole reading programs in my room. I don't have time to run a whole language balanced approach and a bottom-up code-based explicit systematic approach. So I've only got time, if I can choose one, which is the one that's going to meet all of the needs of all of my students. So I need to go to this one. Yeah. Yes, 60% of kids learnt to read that way. So you do have success stories. Great, well done. But you had 40% of your kids getting passed on, not achieving where they should be because the need, it wasn't the right approach for them. So I'm trying to sort of keep throwing stats and approaches and theories out there. And the collaborative discussions means that people can ask questions of each other. And they can say, well, I don't agree. And someone else can tell them their experiences.
So if we think about teasing out, to summarize that piece, we think about teasing out what are the key factors that others also might take from this part of our conversation when they're thinking about leading through change. We'd already touched on, obviously, there'd be professional development opportunities, there'd be resourcing provided, but it's actually the more personable and human element of the change that we really want to focus on here, eh?
Absolutely.
And saying, how often do you create opportunities to sit down and talk about the things that you're talking about, like where teachers can feel confident enough to ask questions. So creating that environment as we're working through this change process is hugely important.
Food helps. Say, I will put on morning tea if you come, and I will give you a freebie of something if you come. And then it's a chance to catch up with your colleagues from other schools that you haven't seen before or something. And that often is a good starting point. And then you start, it just grows.
Yeah. Sometimes we hear from teachers too, not sometimes, like they're really busy and we understand that. But I know myself that taking time to go and sit and talk often is really helpful because of, if I've been thinking about things that are really hard for me to work through as an individual on my own, often I can just talk my way to understanding with someone else, and that really helps to clarify my own thinking. And Absolutely. Then I don't spend hours and hours and hours of my time actually thinking about that thing. So you know, what we're talking about, what you shared really kind of centers for me, one of those key skills for us as teachers and educators and leaders who look after ourselves is to not let thoughts fester and take up our space when we could just go to a 15-minute chat with someone and be done with it.
Absolutely. And it also means you own that new knowledge yourself. You're not passively sitting while somebody is telling you something for professional development. You're able to make those steps. You're able to embed that new learning in your practice and make it personal to you and your context.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's awesome. We've kind of touched on the tools that were useful for implementing. Is there anything else that you want to add to that? Are there any other tools that you haven't talked about that have been really useful as you've been working through supporting others implement this change in literacy practice?
I have really appreciated some good resources that are out there. So there's some great online stuff and there's some great books around. I'm really appreciating, I mean, I've just done the IMSLE course over the summer. So that was really good because it increased my linguistic knowledge. And I needed that because I didn't really know why we used TCH and CH or DGE and GE. I naturally did it because I was one of the lucky ones that could naturally grasp that, but I didn't know why I did that. So that was really helpful. And I think that's a piece that's missing. So we need to support that somehow. I really like Jocelyn Seamer's new book, but I think that's a really nice practical way to look at this is what a lesson outline looks like. This is what a scope and sequence might look like. So these are other resources beyond ideal.
Can you share the name of that book with us, Julie, in case people are listening and they...
Oh, I'm trying to find it. It's Jocelyn Seamer. Let me find it. It is probably, no, I haven't got it here.
We can link it. That's okay. We can link it in the comments because people will be, oh, which book is she talking about? We'll link it in the comments.
Thank you. I'm just on another time it would be clear, but because I'm a little bit nervous, my brain's not working very well. I like the UFLI, the UFLI resource. I think that's a really nice way of making clear, okay, this is how you teach this concept and what you need to do. I'm enjoying the morphology and the syntax scopes and sequences that are coming out of Australia, because I think we need to be thinking once that foundation is secure, what happens at year 3 and year 4 and beyond? How do we keep that explicit growth going? I come back to the 5 pillars of reading, or the big 6 often, because once you've got the alphabetic code sorted, you really need to understand the value of vocabulary and fluency and comprehension and all of those things. And yet on their, at this point, if you just look at them on their own, it's hard to find a way where they all work together. So looking at that, the big 5, the 5 pillars, helps you see where one sits with the other. And remembering that the science of reading is the what we should teach, the why, and the structured approach to literacy is how we put that into place.
I think to add to that too, Julie, it's really important that people understand that in the first instance, their experience will likely be isolated teaching of phonological awareness, isolated teaching of alphabetic principle and spelling concepts, isolated teaching of reading, isolated teaching of vocab, and isolated teaching of comprehension. But as time goes on and our knowledge increases and our explicit instruction becomes greater, we begin to pull everything together and merge very carefully phonological awareness into alphabetic principle, and
into
then
fluency,
and
into
vocabulary, into
yeah.
alphabetic principle. When we're teaching spelling, it's about the word meanings. So we start to bring everything together into a much more, I'm going to say, holistic structured literacy approach, where it's like a dance, and we're moving very carefully and consciously in and out of these different parts of what we would call the building blocks. But when we start out, they feel jilted and they feel separated, and that's okay. That's okay. We all have to start somewhere. It takes time, doesn't it, for that dance to kind of
absolutely. Just like it took time for us when we popped out of uni or whatever, and someone said, oh, how do we teach reading? And you went, well, they're on blue, now they go to this color, and you sort of didn't know what you were doing, and it felt unusual. We've got to unlearn that. Chrissy Braid, I remember saying she felt like when she learnt this approach, she had to unstitch herself, the way that she'd built herself up, and then re-sew herself back together in this new way. And that's a little bit awkward, and yeah, you're right.
And I think one of the things that is really important, and I was recently chatting to Dr. Lorraine Hammond about this, is the importance of us not adding on more as a teacher until we're really, really, really secure. So I don't know if you've found that in the work that, in terms of implementing the change, but we don't want to go and like overwhelm and bombard these people with, okay, right now we're going to go into morphology, and they actually don't have their spelling instruction down pat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We go, and I sort of think of, because we are learning as we go, I think of us the same way that as teachers, the same way that I think of those kids. We have to be aware of that cognitive load. We have to be aware of taking things. We want to go as fast as we can, but we go as slow as we must. So don't expect it to all of a sudden to be put in place. Start where the core is and the energy is, and then just let that sort of merge into the next little by little, because everything you're doing has to be better than what it was before. And as you see that data showing growth, that's going to fuel your next steps. You're going to see, wow, this is working, let's do more, let's spread this to the next room, or okay, I can see that I need to improve my assessment practices here, whatever that is. But the data will tell you what you need to do next.
Yeah, it is very, very diagnostic, isn't it? A structured literacy approach. We're very, very responsive to the changing needs. And so, I think we've talked about formative assessment practices in New Zealand for a long time. My experience has been that, boy, are they coming to the fore in a structured literacy approach.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that's come up recently in our capable group was, how do we assess where kids are at? We don't have time to do all this assessment, but it's about assessing in the moment. It's about doing that checking.
Exactly.
So they've got that, they've mastered it, and developing systems so who you've got. The other thing we need to think about is, instead of doing the reading groups like we used to, making that shift. That's a big shift in itself. So people are trying to get their heads around that, and all of this new learning is scary, requires a lot of support, and a lot of teachers need to feel safe to be able to make those changes, that no one's going to blame them when they look back and they think, well, the kids that came out of your class didn't do very well or whatever, that it's safe for us all to just learn, because the kids are going to do well. They are doing better than they were doing before.
Absolutely.
And we're picking up more students than we were before.
And we are growing a body of way more knowledgeable and skilled teachers along the way.
Absolutely.
Which is very empowering for them. And I'm really confident that we'll get to a point where they can enjoy what they're doing wholeheartedly and go home really proud, knowing they made such a big difference, really truly knowing, not just wondering about whether or not they did make a difference. If you did this all again, what you've been doing in your capable group and in your RTLB cluster or particular schools that you work with, is there anything that you would do differently in terms of causing that shift?
I think I would identify the people that had already drunk the Kool-Aid first, and I would bring them in first, because they are leaders, whether they are recognized as leaders or not. They are the leaders. They have the knowledge, and they will support and buoy along the people around them. I would probably make sure I was accessing leadership within schools a little bit earlier too, because they make the decisions around where the funding goes and how well and how seriously this is going to be resourced and implemented across the school, so that it wasn't just the Senko and the tier 3 kids, but it was a school-wide change.
Yeah, nice.
I'd probably, I don't know if I would have done it earlier on now, but I'm just aware that I think there needs to be a lot more advocacy with teacher training and universities, so that there is some consistency and there is some recognition and reflection of what the science of reading is telling us about what effective teaching is, so that when teachers pop into those classrooms, they know what they're doing. if they don't know what they're doing, then they're going to either, and research even says this, you're going to refer to the methodology that you learnt yourself when you were learning as a reader, which is,
Yeah.
donkey's eggs and sliding. I don't know how old you are, but that's where I was, sliding and flying and, porridge,
Yeah.
whatever it was called.
Horika Pochkin.
Yes, all of those. Yes. And
See,
so we'll
I'm older
rely
than
on that. You learnt those ones in the museum, didn't you? The Museum of Old Crusty Teachers. And the other thing is, yeah, so they're going to either rely on what they learnt when they were learning to teach, or the flavour of what's going on around them. And at the moment, we're trying to change that flavour. So one of the most effective things is right in that pre-teaching training. There needs to be some consistency and advocacy there.
And can I just say, Julie, too, because that was something that came up the other day with the New Zealand initiative Save Our Schools webinar. And one of the things that I wonder could have been added to that conversation in a little bit more detail is that sort of dual responsibility, because a lot of principals will say we need to train these teachers better, but just like you've said, we can train the teachers in structured literacy and the science of reading until they are blue in the face. If they go out and do practicum after practicum after practicum in a whole language balanced literacy school, what will they teach when they get when they get their first paid job as a teacher? They'll teach
absolutely. So I'm really hoping that there's going to be some power to shift practice with this the common, the scope, the common practice model, and the the sequence. I'm really hoping that that's going to shift some practice, but it's going to take a while. There's still professional development being delivered on the language learning progressions. How scary is that? And they're supposed to be phased out this year. What else would I do? I don't know, but I'm not finished yet. We're not finished yet. So I kind of don't know what I do until I'm just figuring it out as I'm doing it.
That's fantastic. I think that clearly we can tell through the course of this chit chat that you're a really, really reflective practitioner. And I'd like to just share some of my key takeaways from this chat in the hope that other people might, think about and reflect on these things as well. I want to go right back to the beginning. One of the things that's really sitting for me is about how organically you've enabled this to happen. So it's purposeful, it's strategic, you know what your next steps are, but you're really listening and noticing and responding to those people that you're working with. And so there are high levels of trust involved because there's a lot at risk when these teachers are putting themselves on the line to make a change process in their teaching practice. I really liked what you said about there's no point in having the teacher aides as keepers of knowledge. I think that's really, really important for us to be thinking about how and who are we getting this important information to. And across all RTLB clusters and RT Lits and learning support coordinators and those people that are supporting in those key roles, particularly in the place of intervention. You've shared some great tools with us. We're going to link some of those tools in the comment thread. You've talked extensively, Julie, about the importance of building knowledge. And what I'm observing through the course of the conversation is the continuation of building knowledge. That really resonates with me, because I sort of say you can never go to a one-day workshop or a two-day workshop for that matter and think that you're going to have all the knowledge and be ready to go. That might strengthen and create a spike in your motivation and your knowledge, but at the end of the day, it's what we do the most consistently that will pay the biggest dividends. And we know that to be true in our kind of physical space if we're trying to get fit, and the same in our mental space, but it's the same for us as teachers in terms of learning. What we do the most consistently will pay the biggest dividends. You've talked a lot about collaboration and the power of collaboration, and I guess setting up learning situations for collaboration and taking the time or creating the time for collaboration to occur. So, and you've shared with us a couple of things that you might do a little bit differently should you, do this round again. And I'm sure you'll get a chance to do this all over again, because education is cyclical. So that is one thing that we can be rest assured of. And you talked about the importance of having those early adopters alongside you initially, and also influencing and working alongside school leaders, because as you say, they're the ones that hold the purse strings, and they're the ones that also can influence at a greater level. If there was one thing that you leave us with that really sits with you, what would be the one thing, particularly for perhaps RTLBs and RTLITs, other people that are working in a role such as yours, that have the opportunity to touch lots of different people and impact that shift en masse?
Oh, one thing is tricky, isn't it? One thing. I think probably understanding that change is hard, and teachers need to believe that they can make a difference. That will be the motivation to make the step, and that'll be the motivation to keep them going when things feel tricky.
Yeah, awesome. You kind of touched on that earlier too, and I have this little 4-step saying that I have, and it's that our beliefs become our thoughts become our actions, and our actions ultimately become our outcomes and the outcomes of everybody we work with. So if we don't believe, or if we believe in something different, that's fundamentally going to impact the outcomes for everybody.
Absolutely. Good. I like that. That's my takeaway. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Julie, for joining us for this chit chat. We've obviously got another chit chat coming up next month, which we're just working on confirming at the moment. But the next time that I will probably see you is at the Cultivating the Literacy Landscape Symposium coming up in August. And I just happened to notice that you're coming to both Christchurch and Auckland.
Well, there's so many great practitioners that are different. Your Christchurch group is different to your Auckland group, and I want to know what the special sauce is where they are.
Yeah, that's really cool. So yes, I'm sort of going to have to make sure that I really dig in. If you've got any really good questions that you want to hear from those practitioners, feel free to email me and all. But I have been thinking of those questions as we sort of head to there. So anybody who hasn't learned about the Cultivating the Literacy Landscape Symposium, I will put a link below this chat as well. The early bird tickets stay early bird pricing until the 15th of May, which is just over 2 weeks away. So a little bit of time to get in there still. Julie, what a great chat it has been. Thank you so much for joining me. But thank you so much ultimately for your for being part of the team, I'm going to say, because this really is a team approach, isn't it? This creating, and each and every one of us brings something different. And the more we collaborate together, the greater influence and hopefully positive outcomes that we will create right across the country.
That's so cool, Carla. I want to actually throw that back at you, because I don't know if you understand the impact of your leadership here. So not just the Ideal Learning platform, but the fact that you're putting on the symposium, the chit chats, the constantly washing us with waves of information that's supportive and access to resources is just so powerful. It's such a step up for people. It's such a nice, easy way for people to progress in their understanding. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you to say that. I love it. I love this space. And I mean, like everybody else, our teachers, our children, our parents deserve to have the very best literacy education system. And yeah, I don't think many of us will rest until we get that across the line. So yeah. So for those of you that have joined us this afternoon, thank you so much. We wish you well in the rest of your term, and we look forward to seeing you maybe at the symposium. You can get to chat with Julie then, see if you can rack her brains as well. And yeah, have a lovely evening, everybody.